Good morning, good afternoon, LinkedIn. Happy Tuesday. It's time for another Let's Build Workspaces with Danielle Urban. How you doing, Danielle?
Doing well. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's been a little bit, hasn't
I
it?
know.
Um,
Yeah,
so
almost
much has
2 months.
happened.
Yeah, so
So,
much has happened in the HubSpot world, and it's the way because I was traipsing the world, so I'm like a whole new person now.
exactly. World traveler, back to talk about maybe the opposite of AI in terms of everything that's new and exciting. Uh, Something that you probably need for AI to work effectively, certainly for your HubSpot to work effectively, is data management, and something that's been locked away in enterprise land for since it's existed. One of the key selling points of Ops Hub Enterprise has been data sets, and they have just come down to pro level. So excited to get in and unbox it today because I have not seen it at all. Uh, and yeah, so you'll be getting some real reactions from this guy. I know it's a powerful thing. I know a lot of people love it. So I'm anxious to dive in and see what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm excited about. I will have to double check this, but I think it came down to pro levels and not just in Ops Hub. Like it's accessible in marketing and sales pro as well.
Awesome. That's why I did
I
not
think.
put ops in the in the
Yeah,
LinkedIn
we'll
post.
have
I
to double
wasn't
check
super
that.
sure,
That
but
is
thank
my
you for that.
understanding, but maybe I'm
Yeah.
just a little too excited. But I've never played with Datasets because I've only really encountered Ops Hub in maybe one account that I sold it into for a specific solution because, um, you know, we're so good at figuring out workarounds that there hasn't been, a really great argument to get people to upgrade to Ops Hub. But that's becoming less true. Thankfully, I'm hopefully going to see more Ops Hub in more accounts so that we can do cool things like run code and workflows, which I love. But data
Indeed.
sets are very exciting. I've got some notes on projects I tried to do in the past that were not possible because we needed to be able to do row level calculations and build reports on top of that. And I feel like this relates to data set or relates to workspaces because it helps you define sort of the first thing you see, especially if you have dashboards set as your home screen when you log into HubSpot. Curating what appears there and what the important information is and getting that in front of people in the way that is the most actionable and the most useful is so key to making HubSpot usable for everyone.
Yeah, and the way that I understand it, from a high level, is this like, on this show specifically, we talk about, the data is in the system somewhere, or we need to bring it in somewhere, and how are we curating the experience um, in HubSpot in these various places, mainly from a user experience perspective, like how are things ordered, and but never, not so much ever, like really filtering the kind of data that can even be seen in that space. And data sets provides that another level of curation where not, I, I probably don't know enough to speak on either topic, but business units from a similar perspective, like, can we separate data inside of the same platform so that if I have somebody from business unit A, um, you know, trying to work on selling stuff for them, like they're not going to be distracted by business unit B, C, D, E. Similarly, I would imagine we can create situations where if like, especially as we get just really large amounts of data in the system, like, and even AI, like managing the context, it might be looking at someday like customer success workspaces versus sales workspaces. Let's do what we can to minimize any kind of confusing data or conflicting data that might be coming in or out of those spaces as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you can even get so specific as to like analyze product lines. Half of the workarounds that I do include lists of some kind. So filtering to lists, adding quick filters for lists, it always comes back to a list. So being able to sort of carve out this data in a different way that makes it a little bit more accessible, so we're not mixing lists and trying to blend that data to get to the thing that we want. Data sets allow you to somewhat curate that. I mean, you still have to define how it gets pulled together, but I think the key for me in data sets is that row level calculation and being able to do conditional fields within the set. And you can also rename fields within the data set. So if you're trying to show something that maybe has a weird internal name and you need your teams to understand what that really is, you can rename that for the display in the data set. But one of the examples I have for the row level calculation, I'm not sure how much data you've got in this account, so I don't know that we'll be able to build it out entirely, but one of my clients wanted to look at increase and decrease on their renewals. And I know that the new MRR properties got rolled out. They basically presented the new, I forget what they called the release, but essentially there were like 3 or 4 properties that got created when you opted into this new MRR measurement. And it looked really great, the like revenue measurement over time, but it literally just created the properties. It didn't backfill the data, and there was no real guide to onboard you to using those properties. They just kind of appeared and then were accessible in reports, which is great and gives you a framework to follow, but you really need the instruction manual to get into those. And as I was looking back through emails in prep for this stream, I was reminded that I was so excited about that release. And I was like, look at this. Here's the link. This is everything we just talked about in our call. That's going to be so accessible. And then I remember hitting the button and chatting with support, being like, I don't think it worked. So getting to some of that like backfill data by being able to use data sets to manipulate the data within HubSpot. A lot of times when we're doing backfills, you have to pull it out, manipulate it in Excel, and then push it back in. And I don't know that you could really take something from a data set and push it back into properties. That might be something we explore down the line, but getting to sort of that increase and decrease on renewals. The example that I have in mind, my client had a renewal pipeline where they had a workflow that duplicated the deal that was closed won and set a renewal date of a year later. And then we had a calculated property that my predecessor set up, props to Seb, that calculated the increase or decrease. And so it just took the other associated deal, subtracted that amount, and then came up with this increase decrease. So we were using that increase decrease property on the renewals pipeline deals to calculate the like contraction or expansion of any deals, but it was very difficult to work with. It was really hard to figure out like what's this plus this, and if there's a renewal and expansion property on the sales deals, because you can only create a property. There wasn't conditional properties at that point or dependent properties. But you didn't want that metric included if you were measuring the sales pipeline, and you didn't want that metric included if you were just looking at upcoming renewals that hadn't been closed yet. And so it was really difficult to use that number, even though we got there. And half of my work with this client was like, how do we get this number to be right? How do we get these charts to show things that are useful? And how do we work this process so that we can get there? And having this in a data set where we can say, if this, then that, we can now say, if it's in this pipeline, then calculate the total of the deal and the increase decrease amount. If it's in this other pipeline, only include the sale amount. So I am very excited, and I think I want to try and build that out so we can click those buttons and see what happens.
Yeah, no, that's going to be fun to look at. Not sure if I have a ton of deals in here, but I think what came to mind as you were describing that, as I always find interest in like why they immediately give us some functionality in places of HubSpot, but not in others. And, as you just mentioned, like when you're originally trying to do that, like conditional properties, like weren't even a thing yet. And, my mind goes to all the people wanting calculated properties and all these forms of data management and data transformation inside of HubSpot, like at these lower levels, like at the property level, right? Like how much do they actually put in there? How much do they want to? And we often don't know what they're working on in other places, like data sets in this case, where it's like, we'll give you a little bit over here, but what you're wanting to do, your end goal requires data sets or this functionality that we're creating over here. So let's not even play, because if we know we're going to give it to you over here, and you're just going to ask continually what you need until you get the data sets. So there's definitely times like that where we've asked for things that we think are very obvious. And this is the difference between Salesforce and HubSpot, in my opinion. And they are always trying to curate the best possible user experience for us, instead of every Salesforce instance starts with, hey, blank slate, do whatever you want. Like, so yeah, you can create custom objects. You can do all of this stuff right out of the gate, but most people shouldn't. So that's why you can't often in HubSpot.
Yeah, I think that makes it much easier to get onboarded and start mapping processes into HubSpot at a baseline from day one. I'm loving this view though. So that pop-up when I first got in here said that they've changed the join view. I didn't know what it looked like before, but this seems great. So in my example of trying to measure the increase or decrease on a renewal deal, obviously I wouldn't need another data source, but the idea of being able to pull in CSVs. So if we wanted to marry this data to some kind of usage data or to accounting data and do like a one-off quarterly report or something where you're taking the CSV and comparing it, you can import that without having to map it to properties, which is amazing. It makes me so excited.
Yeah, this view, like any kind of drag and drop, like whiteboard, like feeling right now, like as I see it, like that is very, very exciting to think about.
This is very cool. So if just for fun to play with this, if we're looking at deals and companies, especially because a lot of people might manage a life cycle stage on the company level, and deals may not reflect that. Like if they didn't renew and there's still a renewal deal open, this would help you see that you need to go close that and clean up your data. But also if they, churn before the end of that 1 year period that we had defined, granted that process probably needs to be revisited start to finish in this case. But you never know what you're getting into when you as a consultant or, you as an in-house provider of these services need to get in and just start with what you're working with, like see what's there and get moving. It's always going to be messy. There's always stuff that should be improved and things that you need to understand. There's a board meeting coming up and you need to get these numbers. Like, yeah, we should overhaul the process and we really should understand where all these pieces should fit together in those new MRR properties. We should have it mapped out as a subscription object rather than, having a duplicated deal. But board meetings next week, we need these numbers. So if you can pull this together, it means that you get the answers you need without having to re-architect anything or get really weird and custom and special, because you can do this all within HubSpot and sort of keep this in your back pocket as you manage that change, because it always takes twice as long as you think it should.
Yeah. And then creating something that's maintainable, like as you discover, oh, I can use this data and this data to paint this story or create this story. Like how often is that, like in the moment, like, okay, I want to know this, it's over on the deal right now. In order to report it on it properly, I need it to be on the company. So I'm going to make a property over there, and then I'm going to make a workflow, and then I'm going to go make a report. And now like it's a maintenance nightmare almost immediately. So the next time somebody looks for that data, you either aren't there to recreate it or manipulate it again. And it just, stuff starts to break. So creating these different curation points almost like in the system, while not trying to put too much pressure on the moment of data creation and input, right? Like that's not the place where we want to, like, we basically crush user experience at some point because we're asking for things that are named differently or way too specific, or like we need them to be named a certain way, like the naming convention, but we don't want to be too hard for the user. So we just leave it single line text, and it all these things start to come up when you're trying to create these experiences, moving towards this higher level of almost like CMS themes versus doing stuff on individual website pages.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. So thinking through this example of how you might need to compare the different totals in trying to do it across multiple pipelines, you can add these formula and derived fields, which that is the thing that makes me most excited about data sets. In this demo account, obviously we don't have a whole lot going on in here, and we don't have the increase and decrease property that I was talking about, but we still could say, if let's build this out. If I looked at some of the docs before I jumped into this, so it's not a true unboxing, but I was very encouraged at how straightforward this is, because there's always an if this, then that. And when you build that formula, even in a calculated property, it can be a little messy to keep track of, and understanding where the else falls, especially if you have nested if statements, or if you're doing, some kind of function within that if statement, you lose it really fast. I got lost in a formula one time, and Hub Helper Harry dug me out on that one. So shameless plug for Nico there. But having this view laid out where it's truly just like if this, then that, and you write your formula. So let's say if a property of deal amount is under 1 million, then show total contract value, or take total contract value plus property of, one thing I wish I had here was the types, because you know how in workflows and reporting you've got, and you can see it here too, you've got the little icons that tell you what it is. In here, I want this to be a number, but I've got to scroll through everything or know exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, field types.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially if it's going to warn you that it needs to be the same.
Yeah.
Maybe don't wait till I get to that point to warn me.
Yeah, I mean, we're sort of in exploring mode here, so we're here to poke holes in it. But
yeah, they appreciate the feedback. They love it.
The example of taking the increase decrease amount plus the deal amount, I know those are both numbers, and I'm going into this with a mission when I try to build out that data set. So it would be a little bit easier to build than what we've got with our very limited data set in our test account here.
Yeah.
But I do think that it would be a lot easier if we could just see what else is here, because this is a number field, and then deal amount I thought was also a number field, total contract value and deal amount, but it's saying all values must be the same data type.
Maybe it's like dollars versus not dollars, but in theory they should both be the same if it's total contract value versus.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, Chris Bryant was doing a kind of a exploration office hours, I think last Friday, and he was going over data sets, and yeah, I think this is it's fairly complex, I would imagine, just based on what I'm seeing, and he confirmed that probably a workshop with like multiple people on a call, even more roundtable like format to go over data sets will be valuable for people to see.
Yeah, I'll be there. There's so much you can do in here though.
Yeah, and this is like the way that this is being presented to us. Always trying to guesstimate why things look differently in HubSpot in various places. And often there's these moments where this functionality has existed for a while, like in terms of being able to display this list of things in this way, right? But it was meant for integrations or robots or whatever, something outside of HubSpot to access it, and not in this format that we're using it right now.
Yeah.
So we didn't need the iconography. We didn't need the UI to be great. And there's always a question of like, do they have to fix that first or make it better first, or can they just reveal it, like reveal the data model to us or reveal the
I want that
functionality,
one. Yeah.
right? In
I
this
always tell
case,
people, like, give it to me and let me mess it up.
right? Yeah, yeah,
That's why I love this.
yeah. So that's probably what we're seeing here.
There's
Like,
a lot in here. I think some of these you can also use in workflows, because I know, or in the Ops Hub features that come with workflows. So when you get into trying to normalize your data or transform your data, I know I've seen the trim used, especially someone was using it for URLs, and just trying to sort of get these. This is interesting. Number of weekdays, because even just today, someone was sharing in Sprocketier talking about SLAs on weekdays versus weekends, and I have tripped over myself for that for months. I've never found a great solution for how to do it. So the fact that HubSpot can recognize weekdays anywhere in the platform is news to me. This could be super cool. There's another example that you could build out here is like your SLA for work days. I know one of my clients was looking at lead follow-up times. A couple of my clients were looking at lead follow-up times, and with the various holidays, I assume that's not in here. But when you have an international company and Spain has a different set of holidays than the US, it can be difficult to calculate an SLA, taking that into account. Again, I'm assuming working days is not going to account for global holidays, bank holidays, but still, this gets us that much closer. And then we could look for those anomalies over time as needed. So that is super cool. And the bucketing I've also done in workflows, where you have a secondary property that buckets another property so that you can just organize it and make it look better on a chart. This solves for that. You don't need a property anymore, which is awesome. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here.
very expansive. And it's ultimately, I know that's what a lot of people want, like true data scientists, that this is where it's like, it's going to be fun to run into those data scientists and be like, no, you can do that now in HubSpot.
Yeah.
Like, I understand maybe 6 months ago you thought it was the worst, but it's available and it's not an enterprise, and all these things that usually get in the way of really understanding how HubSpot can help, businesses. There's always this line between, this balance between talking to people that don't know HubSpot and don't really know, like, they're awesome at business strategy, but they don't have any kind of RevOps, bones or data scientist bones in their body, or even website bones, like the stuff that's required to do this at an ultra technical level, right? And then you talk to those ultra technical people and like, don't talk to me about HubSpot. It's like, no, it's not a blank slate, so I can't do whatever I want. So it's not good enough. That space between like no code and like all of the code, basically, is interesting to be in sometimes. I did want to like just ask real quick. Maybe I should have done this at the start. Like, what kind of end goal? In this case, it related to renewals. Could you revisit, like, what is the thing that took us into Datasets? Like, I need to do this for my business. I can't do it based on this structure of HubSpot or what I'm already doing. So I know I can go do that in Datasets. So I'm going to go build one.
Yeah, it still comes back to reporting for me, and those reports that are maybe outside of the norm. So if your marketing ops team or your rev ops team is trying to get to the report that will show the revenue team the upcoming increase or decrease, and show that to the board, how many deals are increasing when they renew, that number was difficult to get to. And this is, again, like one very narrow example. I think the other example that I want to bring up is with the same client, they were selling a usage-based platform. So they had a SaaS product, and you buy a certain number of units that you can use in that platform, and then you use those units over a time period. They typically had contracts that went for a year, but they could use them in less than a year. I have really struggled to get their CX team views that show that usage, even after they got it mapped to the point where it was pumping into properties, because the calculation between the two is happening within the record. And so I think we worked on this in another session potentially, but when you want to show the amount used in like a tracker bar, or show a view of companies that, within a certain time set haven't used X amount, like if they're under 10% usage within 2 weeks of closing, you can't quite get to that. It's really difficult to visualize, and it's difficult to create truly the workspace that you want your CX team to jump into and be able to take action on. And so by having data sets, you can now do that calculation and use the calculation in a visual in the reporting tool, because you've got this data set created for you. And that's happening if you have the data pumping in and posting to properties in that case. The other really exciting thing that came up, and I'm getting a little bit on a tangent here, is the recent release or beta release around being able to create charts within a record from outside data sources. And I watched the video on how to do it. It's still a code heavy experience. You really need to be able to write the code from scratch, or at least understand what the GitHub library is showing you, so that you can have a starting point. I personally am not at that point, so I'm very excited about it and I want to play with it and learn it. But there's still a big learning curve to be able to use this outside data, and that's where the CSV and data sets can be very helpful. But if you want a live view, like show me the usage for this company week over week. I want to see how many units they've used in each week, or maybe how many they've used against the total, and watch that total go down. You can now do that without having to pipe those properties into HubSpot. You don't have to post the numbers to the company or to the deal. You can just display this chart within the company or deal record, which is super, super cool to me. Because it looks HubSpot-y. It looks like it's supposed to be there. It doesn't look like you're trying to iframe in some spreadsheet like I've done many times to display this data. But obviously you still need the support of a developer who understands those connections. You need to have the outside source that has an accessible API or has the data accessible somehow, and then be able to pull that in and put it together. But it still is a really exciting development, because you can do these line charts and bar charts and have them display. And it solves for me the problem of how do I display the usage to the CX team in a way that's actionable and easy to understand. And then along with data sets, we could show, because they are pumping it into properties and we could use it there. I don't think data sets could take live external data. Maybe that'll come later, like a live join from somewhere else. But we can still show, if we've got those basic properties of like total purchased, total used, and a calculated percentage of units used, now you can create this data set that shows that and makes it really actionable for them and visualizes it for them too.
Yeah, this is super, super interesting. Just to like, from an explanation of what HubSpot can do standpoint, like going back to that line chart, like I've started talking about it in terms of data being in three things needing to happen related to data. And like, it's got to be created, it's got to be, managed and maintained, and it's got to be communicated at some point. And when we start talking about full platform HubSpot, it's trying to avoid the conversations like, well, HubSpot is trying to replace everything, and it can't do this and it can't do this. So why would I try? And it's like, that's not what we're going for. We're trying to enable, at the very least, this unified picture of the customer, so that our customer facing teams can communicate, right, with whoever they need to, each other, leadership, the customer themselves, right? So that's like level 3. At the very least, we want that happening in HubSpot if possible. Then it's a question of, are we managing it and maintaining it in HubSpot? In this case, with the line charts, these UI components, we're not, right? We're just bringing them over, right? And communicating them effectively to our team so that they can communicate, right?
Yeah.
And then we also have that creation level where that is also happening in the other system, right? But thinking about it in terms of like the why behind, like if it's already happening over here, why do we need to do the work to come to HubSpot? Like all this, like it is complex. I'm sorry, but this is why we do that work, because now we don't have to log into the other systems, right? Which is a huge, I think everybody, especially SaaS vendors, underestimate how much that pisses people off when they have to log into a different system of record to do their job, right? They would love to avoid that at all costs, which is why we want full platform. But understanding what we don't want to do is create 10 custom objects and a bunch of properties that need to be managed in a system not designed to do that. Because at this point, we could do just about everything we want in HubSpot, but there's a reason we don't do inventory management, like high levels of product behavior, like success platform tracking. Like it's not there yet and might not ever be, right? These other systems serve that purpose. They're innovating at similar paces to HubSpot. And like an example I often give is like QR code scanning for inventory management in a warehouse. Use the right app for that. They have apps on their phone that HubSpot's never going to have. So we want those systems to be doing that work, right? But when it comes to customer data and the customer view, let's get into HubSpot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think the last piece I want to touch on with this is the visualization of some of this data. So we've got these line charts, we've got these bar charts. Those are new. The last exciting thing that I've seen in the past 48 hours is the color coding on data sets and how you can visualize that in tables with reporting, because I think that will also make things really actionable and quick to read and understand. I love the table visualizations in the reporting tool, but this really takes it to the next level that makes it easy to understand. So when you're dealing with all of this data and you're seeing it all and you're trying to communicate it, as we just talked about, then it makes it much, much easier to interact with when you've got a quick color temperature scale overlaid on your table.
Do you have one of those handy? I'm going to share.
Just looking at it in the product updates, so I can quickly get myself back to that.
Because I need to share like this Google search that just happened, right? And it's like, again, yeah.
I'll find it.
If you want to.
Here, I'll quit sharing for a second.
Yeah. Because this is our challenge and this is why we're here unboxing stuff that is not designed for unboxing, just to share knowledge in different ways. Because I searched conditional formatting HubSpot reporting, right? First,
there it is.
From 2022, from the community, like somebody asking for it, probably. I didn't click in. Second, 6 days ago, the ad, like the beta of what we're talking about here, right? And making green cells and red cells, and of course we don't have any screenshots here, so I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, I'll grab it back when you close your screen share, but they do have the screenshot in the
product update
view.
Yeah. Yep.
So we can see it here. It's not going to be bigger.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool.
Yeah, if you right click it and open as like image or something, I think that's what Kyle does on his shows, maybe.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
So
set your max.
in the news of finding ways to make it look just like their Excel sheets. Like, here's another tool in the tool belt to get people to understand that they can do all the things, or a lot of things in Excel or other systems, right? Let's add it into HubSpot. And to be fair, like, these are the kinds of visuals that that go an unbelievable way in terms of helping people understand data quickly, understand the story, whether or not this is in a dashboard or, in other places in HubSpot. Any little bit that you can use to kind of guide the eye, curate the story, help people understand, goes a long way. And actually came up in the last session with Joshua Oakes, where he was using on a dashboard, he was using green to represent closed lost and red to represent closed won, because that was just like whatever out of the box thing he was using. And I was like, as an example of how hard this is, like, me not knowing what you're going to tell me, like, until you explicitly said this is closed won and this is closed lost, I was thinking the whole time that it was opposite just because it was green and red.
Yep.
Right. So using tools like this, it's really exciting to see them putting things like this. I'm guessing, like, for me, functionally, like, seems like just a small thing, but I'm sure, like, the underlying infrastructure required to do this effectively, like, at the end, they're not Excel. Like, they did not build Excel as HubSpot. So being able to do this and make sure it works effectively for all of the different use cases that want it is hard work. So kudos to the team for continuing to make things like this possible for us.
Yeah, I'm really excited about what's available to us and what's to come, because I feel like a lot of the things that I couldn't do 6 months ago, I can come back and do now, and I can finish projects or make better recommendations for my clients for things that I literally could not that long ago.
Yeah, exciting times. Well, thank you so much. This was a great start to the Datasets journey. I think I do think it'll be great to have like a workshop with multiple experts on the call, just breaking it down, because there is so with a tool set like that, so much power, so many different use cases across the whole life cycle. It'll be like taking one bite of the elephant at a time, and hopefully we can take enough bites for people to understand the value, that it could bring to their organization and their workspaces. With that, until we get that, like, don't wait for us to show that stuff for you to think about your own process and your own user experience, your own workspaces. Find those opportunities and let's grow. Have a great day, everybody.